Hi, this is Ruan from the Alis Ideate team. In this first video of the year, I want to share some of the things we learned during last year as we looked at the way that people have been using Alis Ideate and just considering the process of building software in the real world. I want to share some of the core kind of workflows and the language that's starting to develop that we want to make sure we incorporate into Ideate going into the year. So let's get started. Anyone that has been part of a process where technology is being built has wished that this scenario is true, where you or your team has all the context it needs in order to craft an output. But we know that this isn't the case, and the world is a lot more complex and context is scattered between many different people. And so just to try and make sense of these different ways of capturing context and interacting with context, we've come up with 3 different categories that we are trying to incorporate into Alis Ideate. The first we're calling contributions, where the scenario is I have context and I'm able to add that, and this can be true for a team as well. My team has context and we can contribute that. The second scenario is discovery, where someone else has context and I need to get it out of them, so I can request them to add that context. And then the third scenario is where we have developed, crafted something, and we want to get feedback from someone about that something to whatever end that might be. And so let's look at some scenarios where these different categories are used. In the first scenario, it's quite basic. There's an initial set of context that we have. We start forming an understanding and synthesizing that information, identifying gaps that there are, and continuing to add context. But as I mentioned, there's the scenario where a lot of the context sits with other people, and so we might add some initial context that we've gathered, start forming an understanding, but then seeing that there is additional things that we need, and so we would kick off a discovery in order to get that context. A similar one applies where we form an understanding, start crafting the output, and then realizing there's more information that's required. And then a fourth scenario is where we've gone through that process, crafted the output, and then wanting to get feedback from the people who would be using that or who are relevant in that process, and incorporating that again to go through this different cycles. So this is the full picture. I went through 4 of the individual scenarios, but in a real world example, it might be various combinations and permutations of those scenarios. And so we want to make sure that Alis Ideate enables this simply and in a way that's powerful for our users. And so you'll see that we are trying to incorporate the language around these feedback, contribution, and discovery type interactions into Ideate. Previously, everything was just considered a contribution, but we're trying to make sure that the language is clear. Contribution is I'm adding context that I have. Discovery is I'm requesting context from other people, and feedback is trying to get that input from people about something specific. And so if we look at Alis Ideate at the moment, you'll see on the left-hand side, we've started to bring in a bit more of this language for the context, having contributions, discovery, and feedback separate. And in a very near future, we'll be releasing a video where one of the teammates will be running through just how each of these look and how one would interact and add additional context in each of those cases. Other than just the context, we'll also look at what it means to form an understanding and craft outputs, making use of overview insights and our newly launched studio. So watch this space, we're excited to share that with you. One last thing that I want to note is that you are now able to give feedback in Ideate itself without having to send me or the team an email. You can simply click on the support button and you can then log a bug, request a feature, or you can just share your workflow and some of the things that you think would be helpful for us to see. And this is actually making use of Ideate in the background. And so you are able to share your screen and interact with Ideate in the way that you usually would, and we are able to capture that. So please share your feedback and help us to make the product better. we're looking forward to this year. We're looking forward to working with you and for what the year has for all of us. Until next time.